The swarm awakens. The first tremor was dismissed as a minor quake. Seismographs in Tokyo and San Francisco twitched, registering something unusual beneath the Pacific. By morning, the tremors became pulses, steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something massive buried deep below. In Metropolis, Clark Kent woke to the sound of distant thunder. But when he looked up from his breakfast table, there were no clouds in the sky. His hearing caught something else. A low hum, millions of voices, not quite words, vibrating beneath the surface of the earth. Chilled him. Within hours, chaos erupted. Fishing vessels in the Pacific vanished. Satellites caught strange plumes of steam rising in perfectly symmetrical circles across thousands of miles. Navy patrols reported strange shapes, living fortresses, emerging from the deep. By the time Superman streaked across the globe and descended on Honolulu, it was too late. The Hiveborn had awakened. The creatures burst from the ocean in a tide of black and gold, insectoid monstrosities with armored carapaces that shimmered in sunlight. Each one was taller than a man, with claws sharp enough to shear steel and wings that buzzed like saw blades. They came not in hundreds, but in millions, flooding beaches, tearing through harbors, climbing skyscrapers as if the city were nothing but a hive waiting to be consumed. Superman landed in the heart of the chaos. Civilians screamed, cars overturned, and the ground shook as the swarm advanced. With a single breath, he unleashed a hurricane-force gale that scattered the front line of Hiveborn like brittle twigs. Heat vision cut through their ranks, melting carapaces, turning alien flesh to slag. But for every one that fell, 3 more climbed over the bodies. A Hiveborn warrior leapt onto a collapsing overpass, mandibles snapping as it lunged for a mother clutching her child. Superman was there in an instant, the blur of his cape shielding them, his fist shattering the monster into fragments. The woman's terrified eyes met his for a brief second before she ran, clutching her child tighter. Superman turned back to the swarm, his jaw set. This wasn't an invasion. This was a release. The U.S. Navy brought its full arsenal to bear. Destroyers and aircraft carriers surrounded the swarm, unleashing missiles and torpedoes into the tide. Explosions lit the horizon, but when the smoke cleared, the Hiveborn simply adapted. Their armor hardened, wings grew thicker, and in minutes they surged forward again, climbing onto ships and tearing through steel with terrifying precision. Superman fought above and below the waves, a living weapon tearing through monsters faster than the human eye could follow. He ripped Hiveborn apart with sheer strength, shattered armored beasts with sonic claps, and dove into the ocean's depths to halt Leviathan-sized drones from breaching naval hulls. Still he felt it, the swarm's unity. They were not fighting blindly. Something directed them. Each drone's movements were coordinated, purposeful, as though guided by a single mind. And beneath it all, that same hum, louder now, thrummed against his skull. The Hiveborn were speaking, not to humanity but to each other. In Metropolis, scientists scrambled to understand what they were seeing. Across the world, governments tried to coordinate defenses, but reports flooded in faster than they could react. Shanghai, Rio de Janeiro, Cape Town, Sydney. All at once, Hiveborn nests emerged, not from the sky, but from the earth itself. Ancient caverns cracked open, spilling forth the swarm. Satellite imagery revealed a terrifying truth. The Hiveborn had not arrived from space. They had always been here, slumbering in vast subterranean hives seated deep beneath the crust, waiting for their queen's call. Superman heard the whispers in his mind grow louder. Awaken. Consume. Hive. And then another voice, colder, commanding. Queen calls. Queen feeds. In Honolulu, Superman finally faced something larger than the rest. The ground split open, and from the chasm rose a Hiveborn colossus, 30 feet tall, its carapace layered in obsidian plates, eyes glowing with a sickly green light. A Hiveborn champion. It roared, and the swarm fell back, giving it space. Superman hovered above, heat vision blazing, but the creature leapt with startling speed. Its claws closed around him, driving him into a skyscraper. Glass shattered as they crashed through floors, the monster's mandibles snapping inches from his face. Superman braced, pushing back with all his strength, but the champion's grip was unrelenting. The hum in his head spiked into a shriek. For an instant, he felt something foreign pressing against his thoughts, an attempt to dominate his will, to fold him into the hive. Clark's eyes flared, and with a guttural roar, he broke the creature's claws, driving a punch through its chest so powerful it cratered the building beneath them. The champion fell, ichor spilling across the streets. The swarm shrieked in unison, not in fear, but in rage. Superman floated above the ruins, chest heaving, scanning the horizon. More champions were rising across the world. He wasn't facing an enemy that could be outpaced. This was a war of numbers. A war of patience. A war Earth wasn't ready for. And deep below, in the ocean trenches, he finally saw her. Through the hum, through the swarm, through the chaos, he sensed a vast presence. The hive-born queen. Her body stretched for miles, her psychic will binding every drone, every soldier, every champion. Her eyes, if they could be called that, opened in the abyss, and for the first time she looked at him. Her voice thundered into his skull. "Oh, you are not their savior. You are their harvest." Superman staggered in the air, his mind reeling. Never before had he felt such malice woven with such certainty. The hive-born were not invaders. They were Earth's inheritance, seeded long before humans walked upright. The planet itself had been prepared as their hive. He clenched his fists. Humanity would never accept that fate. Hovering above a city in flames, surrounded by a tide of monsters that only grew stronger the longer they fought, Superman whispered to himself, "They're not food. They're not prey. They're human. And I will fight for them." He shot into the sky like a missile, sonic booms cracking behind him. His next move would not be to defend another city. It would be to find the hiveborn's true nest, and strike directly at their heart. But even as he raced across the globe, the hum deepened, and more nests erupted. The war had only begun. Superman at war. For 3 straight days Superman did not sleep. He moved like a streak of fire across the globe, shattering hive-born nests as fast as they surfaced. One moment he was in Cairo, tearing a colossal drone apart before it could flatten the pyramids. The next, he was in Buenos Aires, catching collapsing skyscrapers with his shoulders while vaporizing wave after wave with heat vision. He saved millions, but it was never enough. For every nest destroyed, 2 more ruptured the surface. For every swarm burned to ash, another poured out from the Earth's wounds. The hive-born weren't invaders. They were a plague. Plague with purpose. By the 5th day, Earth was reeling. Military forces fought heroically, but their weapons were ill-suited to the enemy. Bullets ricocheted from carapaces. Tanks were torn open like tin cans. Warplanes were shredded midair by hive-born flyers whose wings sliced metal like razors. Nuclear weapons were considered, and rejected. Hive-born swarms burrowed too deep, spread too wide. A nuclear strike might kill millions of humans and leave the swarm untouched. Superman fought on every front. His suit tattered, cape scorched. He was invulnerable to the hive-born's claws and venom, but not to exhaustion. Every second brought more cries for help, and even with his speed, he couldn't be everywhere at once. In the Pentagon's war room, generals spoke with hollow eyes. "We're losing," one admitted, voice breaking. "If this keeps up, we've got weeks. Months at best." And then a scientist from MIT slammed a file onto the table. "We've cracked their signal." It was Dr. Eliza Corr, a xenolinguist whose career had once been dismissed as science fiction. She had spent 72 hours listening to intercepted hive-born transmissions. The swarm's humming wasn't just noise. It was a psychic network, a hive mind operating across frequencies that resonated through the Earth itself. At its core was the Queen. She didn't just command the swarm. She was the swarm. Every drone, every champion, every soldier was an extension of her will. Cut off the head, Dr. Kaur said grimly, and the body dies. But the queen was buried deep within the earth's mantle, protected by legions and an environment no human could survive. Even Superman, she warned, might struggle against the crushing heat and pressure. Then I'll go, Superman said when the transmission reached him. No, Dr. Kaur replied sharply over comms. You can't. Not yet. You've been fighting non-stop. If she breaks you, there's nothing left between us and extinction. Humanity has to fight too. Superman said nothing, but his eyes hardened. She was right. The Hiveborn pressed their advantage. In Paris, entire arrondissements were overrun, the Eiffel Tower half-shattered, its steel girders webbed with Hiveborn resin. In Johannesburg, swarms tunneled up through highways, turning the city into a labyrinth of collapsed roads. Refugees clogged every border, millions fleeing inland as coastal cities burned. The world's infrastructure was breaking. But something else was happening too. In Detroit, auto factories were converted into weapons plants overnight. Engineers stripped down hive-born corpses, harvesting their chitin for makeshift armor. In Seoul, programmers wrote viruses to jam hive-born communication bursts, buying minutes of confusion in battle. In Kenya, farmers welded scythes onto old tractors, driving them straight into nests. Humanity was bleeding, but it was adapting. Superman saw it firsthand. In Mexico City, when the swarm breached Zocalo Square, he arrived expecting carnage. Instead, he found soldiers and civilians fighting shoulder to shoulder. A teenage boy stood on a rooftop with a jury-rigged energy cannon built from scavenged hive-born tech. With each blast, drones fell screaming. A grandmother hurled Molotov cocktails into tunnels. When Superman landed, battered and ready to shield them, the people shouted at him, not for rescue but to join in. And for the first time since the war began, Superman smiled. Still the Queen watched. Deep below, her psychic presence coiled like a serpent, striking at him in every battle. She whispered in his mind as he fought, showing him visions of failure. He saw Metropolis crumbling, Lois Lane's body among the rubble. He saw the Daily Planet twisted into a hive-born spire. You are one. We are many, her voice hissed. You cannot win a war of hunger. You cannot outlast eternity. Superman fought the whispers, but they gnawed at him. One night, above the ruins of Manila, he hovered alone. Smoke choked the stars. His cape was shredded, his muscles aching with fatigue no sun could heal. He closed his eyes, listening to the cries echoing across the globe. He wanted to believe he could bear it all. But the truth struck him harder than any blow. This was not his war alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was humanity's greatest strength. The next morning, the United Nations broadcast a message to the world. It wasn't polished. The room was dim, the officials exhausted. But their words burned with resolve. This is not a war we leave to Superman. This is not a war we leave to gods. This is our war. Every city, every street, every family. Humanity will not go quietly. Across the world, broadcasts showed ordinary people holding the line. In Warsaw, firefighters turned water cannons into acid sprayers. In Mumbai, slum districts welded barricades of steel and glass. In Alaska, hunters tracked hive-born tunnels and blew them with dynamite. Everywhere, humans refused to be food. Superman fought with renewed strength, but now he wasn't a savior. He was a soldier among billions. In Berlin, he carried wounded fighters to safety while engineers detonated explosives beneath the Brandenburg Gate, collapsing a nest. In Lagos, he shielded children while militia blasted hive-born flyers out of the sky. The tide wasn't turning, but it was slowing. And then came the whisper of opportunity. Dr. Kaur called again, her voice electric with discovery. Superman, we've found it. A resonance point. A node in their network. She explained quickly. The hive-born hive mind pulsed strongest at certain geographic locations. One, in particular, lay beneath the Himalayas, a psychic relay channeling the Queen's will across the planet. If that node was destroyed, the swarm would weaken everywhere. Superman knew what that meant. Then that's where I go. He soared across continents, his mind steeled. Beneath the snowy peaks of the Himalayas, hive-born swarms had already erupted, transforming valleys into blackened pits of resin. Thousands of drones crawled the cliffs, their screeches echoing across mountains that had stood unbroken for eons. Superman descended like thunder. Fists shattered hive-born champions. Heat vision carved through armored lines. The battle raged for hours. Snow turned to steam, rock turned to glass. Finally, he tore into the ground itself, plunging into the tunnels. And there, glowing with psychic energy, pulsed the node. A hive-born monstrosity, a guardian with 6 arms and wings of obsidian, rose to protect it. Superman set his jaw. His eyes flared red. The war was no longer defensive. This was the first true strike against the Queen. Humanity strikes back. The hive-born node beneath the Himalayas shattered with a sound that wasn't heard by ears, but felt in the marrow of every living creature. Superman drove the obsidian guardian into the earth, his fists a blur, and when the thing's carapace cracked, he blasted it apart with a heat vision strike that seared through stone. The node collapsed in a shockwave of psychic static. Across the world, hive-born swarms faltered for the first time since the war began. Their movements stuttered. Their coordination wavered. In Manila, soldiers reported drones colliding midair. In Nairobi, militia fighters cut down a champion whose strikes came seconds too late. Superman rose from the rubble, battered but triumphant, his breath steaming in the cold mountain air. For the first time he felt something new. The hive-born could bleed. And humanity smelled blood too. Governments that had been teetering on collapse surged back into action. The United Nations convened not with speeches, but with orders. Cities became fortresses. Factories became war engines. Humanity shifted from survival to counterattack. In Detroit, engineers unveiled the Hive Buster, a cannon built from scavenged hive-born biotech, firing energy pulses tuned to their nervous system. In Tokyo, hackers discovered they could mimic fragments of the Queen's psychic resonance, sending false commands to the swarm and luring entire battalions into traps. Even rural villages armed themselves. Farmers in Argentina strapped flamethrowers to tractors. Fishermen in Indonesia dropped depth charges into underwater hives. Everywhere, humans weren't just waiting for Superman, they were fighting. And he fought beside them. In Cairo, Superman tore open a hive-born spire, ripping drones apart while Egyptian soldiers poured in behind him, clearing tunnels with fire. In Sao Paulo, he lifted collapsing favelas on his shoulders long enough for civilians to escape, then dove underground to help militias collapse tunnels. Wherever he went, he saw the same thing, human eyes burning with defiance. The war was still brutal, still bloody, but it no longer felt inevitable. Still the Queen adapted. From her throne deep within the planet, her psychic reach reasserted itself. The hive-born swarms moved with renewed precision. The faltering rhythm of their attacks became organized again, pressing humanity back toward the brink. And with her renewed strength came whispers, directed only at Superman. "You are mine, last son. You are not human. You are alien like us. They will never trust you when the dust clears." Superman ignored her, but the words scraped at old wounds. In Metropolis, even as he saved thousands, he noticed the fearful stares. He was their protector, but was he truly one of them? When the war ended, would they remember him as their savior, or fear him as the alien who fought fire with fire? The turning point came in Eastern Europe. The hive-born tunneled beneath the Carpathian Mountains, constructing a vast underground hive large enough to swallow nations. If it spread unchecked, the swarm could cut Europe in half. Superman descended into the hive alone. The tunnels stretched for miles, walls glistening with resin, crawling with drones. He smashed through them in waves, his fists cracking shells, his heat vision scorching black shadows into the walls. But this time he wasn't alone for long. Resistance fighters from Poland, Romania, and Ukraine surged behind him. They carried hive-buster cannons, scavenged explosives, even sharpened spears tipped with hive-born chitin. "Go!" one shouted. "We'll hold the tunnels. Get to the Queen's chamber." Superman hesitated. He could hear their heartbeats, fast but steady. They knew what they were choosing. He gave a silent nod and plunged deeper. The hive's heart was a cathedral of horror. Thousands of eggs pulsed in sticky resin. At the center, a colossal figure stirred, the hive-born queen herself. She was larger than any champion he had faced, her carapace gleaming like obsidian armor, her crown of spines glowing with psychic light. Her eyes, hundreds of them, fixed on him. And her voice didn't whisper. It thundered in his skull. "You cannot kill me, Kryptonian. This planet is mine. My children are eternal." Superman stood tall, fists clenched, cape torn but unbowed. "You call yourself eternal," he said. His voice carried across the cavern. "But you've never faced humanity." The Queen struck. Her psychic force hammered into his mind like a tidal wave. Superman staggered, visions crashing through his skull. He saw Lois screaming as Metropolis burned. He saw himself atop a throne of bone, worshipped not as protector but as conqueror. He saw Earth emptied, stripped of life, a husk orbiting a dead sun. He fell to one knee. The Queen's laughter was like the buzzing of a billion wings. "You are one. I am Legion. You cannot resist." And then he heard something else. Through the roar, through the psychic storm, faint voices broke through. Not whispers of terror, but voices of defiance. "Hold the line," a soldier cried in a collapsing tunnel. "For Earth," shouted a militia fighter detonating her last grenade. "Not today," screamed a child's voice from a refugee camp, watching news footage of Superman's stand. Their voices weren't psychic. They were human, and yet they reached him. Superman's vision cleared. He rose to his feet, red light blazing from his eyes. "You're wrong," he said, teeth bared. "I'm not alone. I never was." He struck. Heat vision cut through resin, burning thousands of eggs in a fiery wave. The Queen shrieked, her spines flaring with psychic rage. She lunged, claws slamming into him, hurling him against the cavern wall. Rock shattered. Dust filled the air. But Superman surged forward again, trading blow for blow. Her claws gouged his skin, her psychic force hammered his mind, but he fought on. Every strike was fueled not just by his strength, but by the resilience of the people he protected. Above, humanity fought their own battle. Resistance fighters detonated charges, collapsing hive-born tunnels, cutting off reinforcements. Engineers jammed the swarm's coordination, buying Superman precious seconds. The war wasn't his alone anymore. At last, with a roar that shook the hive, Superman drove his fists into the Queen's chest. Carapace cracked. Her psychic scream tore through the cavern, a final desperate attempt to drown his mind. He didn't falter. Grabbing her by the crown of spines, Superman lifted the Queen high, and slammed her into the cavern floor with a force that split stone. Heat vision blazed, carving through her heart. The hive-born Queen convulsed. Her shriek turned into a hiss. Her spines dimmed. And then she lay still. The cavern trembled. Across the world, hive-born drones froze, their coordination unraveling. Entire swarms collapsed mid-charge. Flyers plummeted from the sky. Underground tunnels went silent. The Queen was dead. But Superman knew the war wasn't over. She had planted nests across the planet, her spawn seeded deep. Without her will, they were weakened, but not gone. The Hiveborn War had reached its climax. Humanity had struck back, but the final reckoning still loomed. And Superman, standing over the Queen's broken form, knew the last stand was coming.